This is Paul Catalina's Top 5 at 5:55.
Brought to you by Champion Salon and Barber, 2 locations here in Waco, in Woodway and downtown. Just a stone's throw from us. This picture got me cracked up. Top 5.
Oh, God.
Gary Patterson feuds.
Frogs of War coming at you.
Can't block me from seeing this.
So, I started out today with the intention of doing, in the spirit of Gary Patterson, top 5 college football coaching feuds. You know, Jim Donnan and Phil Fulmer got into a fight one time. You know, I think they're actually friends now. But
John Chaney and Calipari.
Yeah, John Chaney, like all the coaches feuds, because I thought that would be funny. But when I started making a list of all the things I remembered, Gary Patterson's name kept coming up.
Yeah.
So I said I need to do 2 separate lists. So I will do the top 5 Gary Patterson feuds. Okay. Number 5, Gary Patterson versus ex-players. He has been sued by ex-players. The wide receiver now blank. I wrote it down and I didn't bring it with me. But there's a wide receiver that sued and named him in a lawsuit a couple years ago. And, yeah, his ex-players have gotten infused. Now, I think the wide receiver was kind of complaining a little bit too much. But
yeah, no, that was, I got it right here in front of me. Colby Listenby.
Yeah, Colby Listenby.
Now, we don't know if he was telling the truth or not.
Not telling the truth or not.
Yeah.
But that was a feud. I'm just talking about feuds. I'm not talking about who's right and who's wrong. But there are feuds, and he's involved in a lot of them. Number 4, Gary Patterson versus everyone on Twitter. You can wake up one morning and find out that you've been blocked and not even know what you did to get blocked by Gary Patterson.
You might wake up one morning and be blocked by Gary Patterson, and his wife accidentally followed you, and like 4 of his assistant coaches. That could happen.
That did not. That happened.
Yeah, that happened to me. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of Baylor fans who have been blocked by Gary Patterson.
Yeah, no, I know how it happened too. I just was scrolling through a time. It's like 7 years ago at this point. This is the heat of the Briles-Patterson rivalry. And I looked at my phone one day, and somebody had quote tweeted Patterson, and I was like, why can't I see this tweet? That's weird. And I looked at it, and I'm like, oh, I'm blocked by Gary Patterson. I've never tweeted at the man. That's fine. That's fine, whatever. But then, like, in the same time period, I look at my phone one day, it's like, Kelsey Patterson has followed you. And I'm like, what? And I look back at my phone, and she had not followed me any longer. I guess an accidental slip or whatever.
No, it was probably just to see what you said when you realized you were blocked by Gary Patterson.
I don't know, but I don't even think I said that much about it. But then also had like 3-4 assistant coaches follow me around that same time from TCU. It was just kind of odd because I had blocked him back.
All right. Number 3, Gary Patterson versus Orion Stewart and Ahmad Dixon.
Yeah.
They talked a little trash to Gary. Ahmad Dixon was kicked out of the game doing it and walking off. And in the post-game press conference, Gary Patterson says, if they want to keep this going, I know where Gary Patterson lives. Gary Patterson lives in Fort Worth. Yeah. That's what says in the third person when he could just let it go.
Yeah, I mean,
another deflection, though. They lost a gut-wrenching game. Who was the safety for Baylor? Picked off a pass. I think Paha might have been the quarterback.
KJ Morton?
Yeah, no, it wasn't him. It was it didn't matter, but they picked off a pass, and that was part of the postgame. Yeah.
I mean, that's a funny.
And Ahmad was hanging around too much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, that's a funny little tussle because that's 2 of the heart of Waco right there that he was going up with. That wasn't just Baylor players. That was Waco Baylor players and Ahmad and Orion, and they were not backing down either from that.
No,
I mean,
those two. No.
Right.
Yeah.
Number 2, and this probably could have been number 1, but it's not the most recent.
Yeah.
It was Gary Patterson versus Art Briles. And I'm gonna tell a couple different stories here that we may not have told on the air. So Smokey and I are at Big 12 Media Days. I think it's the first time we went. And it was that particular Big 12 Media Days lined up with, we were in Dallas for 2 days. We got on a plane, went to Oxnard because Cowboys training camp was starting. So Gary Patterson sat down, we asked him and said, this whole thing with you and Art Briles, I think the question was, is that more gamesmanship or whatever? And Gary Patterson looked us dead in the eyes and said, Art Briles and I don't have any kind of feud. He and his wife and I went on vacation together last year. And we sat there slack-jawed.
Yeah, I almost passed out.
What? Really? I mean, I didn't get that off Coach Briles, but he keeps it pretty close to the vest. So we went and asked somebody who at the time, and I won't divulge her name, but she was pretty close to the Briles family and worked for the Cowboys. I'll just tell you that. Yeah. And we asked her, hey, did Art and his wife go on vacation with Gary Patterson and his wife? And she said, no, never. She goes, they were on the same flight to a coaching convention together.
That counts as vacation.
They were on the same plane.
They were on a flight. They were leaving town.
These two hated each other.
Yeah.
I think they respected each other as football coaches, like as far as the X's and O's part of it. And there's no doubt that they were good for each other from a competition standpoint, both programs. While that was at the heat of what it was, they were at their best. Both teams were. I mean, they were both right there knocking on the college football playoff at the height of that heat. And, subsequently Briles gets fired and TCU's just kind of been sort of good, sort of whatever ever since then. Their best teams were last when that Baylor rivalry was really at its peak. But, yeah, they did not like each other. It was clear there was animosity there. And I think Gary took some shots, at the end when Briles really couldn't have a chance to respond that, maybe were valid in some ways, but also were cheap shots.
Well, also, he took one at the beginning after a game he won by 34 points or 31 points and said Art Briles was stealing plays. So,
him and everybody else, apparently. Because everybody's done that.
Yeah. And we'll go to number one. It's now Gary Patterson.
Wait, when he accused Orion of getting in his face, wasn't that after 61-58? Was that after? It would have been, right?
That's the thing is we have to narrow it down. Yeah. There's been multiple incidents.
No,
That game between Baylor and TCU?
It was after a loss.
That's always after a loss.
Yeah.
It's SMU rants after.
Except 2010 when they said they stole.
That one was after a win, which makes no sense at all.
They beat the hell out of Baylor.
Yeah. And number one, now Gary Patterson versus SMU.
Oh,
which
I think this gave SMU more traction with the Big 12.
Yes, it did.
I think it did. I think that's just the win.
If you throw SMU TCU in as a new rivalry, I think that's great for the Big 12, Dallas versus Fort Worth or whatever you want to do there. But yeah, SMU's rise was the story of that game last week, in my opinion, and just how handily they beat TCU. And that's something that I imagine can't sit well with him. I mean, that was a team he never had to worry about. That was a rival that didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and now they're beating him 2 years in a row. I mean, so I could see where he's a little on edge in that regard.
It's not just I picked out. Maybe this is one where he's like against a group like Twitter. He's again like it's the president, it's the AD, it's Sonny Dykes, it's the players with the flag. I mean, he is mad at all of SMU.
Well, I think you can tell from. When we were talking to Max earlier, and I'm not sure how the rest of the country feels, but the overwhelming sentiment that I got in just looking around a little bit yesterday was I think everybody felt like, okay, dude, calm down. You're kind of blowing this up a bit too much. And so, he does that sometimes. He does that often, and that's why there's a list that actually could be expanded rather easily with multiple. I mean, I saw a Tech fan, as soon as the Gary thing, the story yesterday popped up, had their own version of, their tiff with, it's everybody. So, yeah, It's an interesting thing there with GP.
From Jay Bird to wrap it up, TCU is his personal. I can't even read that word. His style wouldn't fly elsewhere, and there's a lot to that as well.
TCU is his personal fiefdom. His style wouldn't fly elsewhere.
That's a big word for me. All right, thanks to hey.